Bonsoir à tous, bonsoir à toutes. On est très heureux d'organiser cet événement. On remercie très chaleureusement Laurence Delamarre, Coralie Gauthier de nous accueillir ce soir dans ce lieu extraordinaire. I will switch in English and the conversation will be in English. I am Jean-Kenta Gauthier. This is my dear friend David Desrimet. I'll let you introduce our imprint.
Thank you, Kenta. So to start with this short, very short little story, and we won't talk long with Kenta, and nobody's going to talk long. We all agreed with that for the sake of everyone. It's a 40-minute conversation, tops, promise. So the occasion has been given to us to go through the amazing words of Daniel Blaufuchs, which I met through Kenta, and we immediately seriously had this idea to make books together because Kenta loves books, and what I do is I run JBE Books, a publishing house based in Paris. So we started this little imprint called JKG X JBE Books, which is a lot. And I will let Kenta introduce Daniel and our beautiful speakers tonight. But again, I wish to thank you all for being there and to discover with us the work of Daniel Blaufuchs in that beautiful book. Thank you.
So we're extremely happy to launch the first book that we published of Daniel Blaufuchs, who is sitting here in the middle. Daniel has been working for almost over 6 years now on a work called The Days Are Numbered. Duncan Forbes, director of photography at the V&A in London, Beatrice Gauss, independent curator, critic. Beatrice curated incredible exhibitions, including, for instance, the François Morlet retrospective at DIA a few years ago. I would just like to say one thing. We are here in Karl Lagerfeld's former studio and library. A few years ago at Paris Photo, Karl Lagerfeld selected a few works from the fair. There was a little publication done on this occasion, and he selected one work by Daniel from a previous, I would say, ongoing project called Attempting Exhaustion. It was one of Daniel's famous windows. So it's a good introduction and connection with Daniel's ongoing project now, which is called The Days Are Numbered. And I wish you a very good talk.
Great, thank you, Kenta. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. I hope you're all awake. It's been an exciting but exhausting week, but nonetheless, it's a great privilege to be here talking to Daniel to end the Paris Photo Week. We haven't really planned anything, so it's going to be a little bit freeform. And I hope you have a copy of the book. Is there a copy of the book going around somewhere? Yes, hopefully, so you can see it. I've actually seen this work in 4 different forms, I think. The book form, which is by far the most intimate form. I've seen it as single sheets, usually stored in archival boxes. I had the privilege of going to see Daniel's big show at Mart this summer, where a whole year of the project was laid out on the walls in that very spectacular gallery space. It was kind of quite overwhelming, I think. And then I've had the opportunity, I think probably the first time I saw this project was at Frieze in London, where it was 1 month laid out. So it takes many different forms. We might try and get into that a little bit in our conversation today. And the title of the project is The Days Are Numbered, which in English is a kind of fine, ironic title. So I hope we might be able to unpin some of the layers on that title. But maybe let's just start with the question of fabrication and how you make it. I'm very intrigued by this. I like to kind of imagine you sitting there, writing your diary, pasting your diary. So perhaps we can start there.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Duncan. Thank you, Beatrice. Well, it's like you say, I just sit down and go from there. But obviously it's influenced by, I do it every day. And it's influenced by the day, by what I've been thinking or what I've been reacting to during that day. So it can be something personal, but it can most of the time is something bigger than me, something political, some tragedy, some coronation, some procession. But that mixed with some personal happenings that And we all know that, it's what Georges Perec called the infraordinaire, which is our daily lives, that apparently amount to nothing compared to what surrounds us. But in the end, they are our lives, so that's all we have. But basically, the process is that there is a pattern, which is the two Polaroids. So I go back to that always. But then it can, like when I'm traveling, I tend to have more elements because I see more during the day, so I have more.
You always start with a single A4 page, just
Yes.
to be very clear about
Yeah,
the
it's always an
process.
A4 page. It's always one A4 page, and at least one instant image. It can be Fuji, it can be Polaroid, it can be something else.
Can it be a found photograph? Because you also multiply the sources.
It can be a found photograph, or it can be something done with a photo automat, like I did today at Pompidou. They have an automat there with an image from the Surrealism exhibition from Max Ernst. So I try to use all the possible variations, but then there needs to be. I mean, there are very few pages. I would say in the 6 years, maybe there are 2 or 3 pages where there is not an image. Where the writing or the image I cut out from somewhere was enough. But there is this rule that there should be an image. The rules are made to.
And you do it every day?
You can. I do it every day. I mean, I can skip one day at time if I'm too overwhelmed, but I'll do it like the next morning.
Because I did wonder whether you returned to it at some point or inserted things in retrospect
No.
at all.
The romance of mistakes, Duncan.
Yeah, exactly. No, we were spotting mistakes in Daniel's.
Duncan saw a mistake at the month, which is September, that is at Paris Photo, that I wrote rhetoric, spelled it wrongly in English. No, I never go back, and that's why they're all stamped with a running, how do you call it, a running stamp that changes the number every time you press, which actually belonged to my grandfather, so it's like it's been in the family.
And that's the first meaning of the days are numbered, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
As opposed to marking the calendar day.
as opposed. There is no, sometimes I cut out from a newspaper the day, but I never write the day. Usually because I think that's too much. I like it that you get kind of lost. So it's counted by this very bureaucratic system of stamping. And that makes it, once it's stamped, I mean, I could go back and change a little bit, but I could never change the page. I could never start from the scratch, but I never go back. I mean, there are bad days, and there are bad works in that sense, but life is like this, and I think so is the work.
I did wonder whether you'd gone back, because the third entry in 2023 states the fascist state of Israel, and I'd actually thought that you might have gone back and inserted that, bearing in mind what happened.
I
later
wish
in the
I had, because I had lots of complaints at the exhibition in Lisbon, because it's very probably it became, and I'm Jewish, and so my relationship to what's going on, it's very ambivalent. But it became much more serious after October 7th, obviously. So when I wrote that this was January 3rd, it was about the overturning of the justice system by Netanyahu. And it's actually a quote from a newspaper. But then obviously when the show went on, more than a year later, it became much more relevant to the viewers. So I had complaints by Israelis and I had complaints by Palestinians in the show, which I felt it kind of translates my feelings.
But to go back to the daily practice, something that I find interesting is that it's actually an artistic tradition, but that's usually kept for the studio. Many artists do practice their art, even though it may not lead to an actual work, every day. And this is a surprise for Daniel. That tradition actually can be summed up in the Latin phrase nulle dies sine linea, which was first actually phrased by Pliny the Elder about, so a Roman writer, about a Greek painter who said, there's not a single day without drawing a line. what will become of that line.
Can I use that tomorrow?
Please
No.
go ahead. And so this is not just about showing off with that little Pliny the Elder reference. My question is, what I find truly interesting, you said yourself, this is not a diary. It's almost calisthenics, I guess, exercise, but also a way to channel feelings, maybe sometimes frustration, sadness, melancholia, but also beauty, joy. And this, from the get-go, you wanted to make public.
Well, I mean, at the start of the project, I don't know if it was meant to be public. Like many years ago, I did a book while I was in residency at the Royal College of Art in London, and I started doing a diary because all students seemed to be very serious, and they were very very conceptual, and I was not. So I decided to do a diary with Polaroids already. We're talking about 1993, so it's back in the old days. And then in the end, it was published. So suddenly, this idea of public, what is public and what is private, kind of, it melts one in the other. But what was clear for me from the start is that it should not be a diary where I write, today I ate mussels, or today I fell in love, or today I had an argument. It shouldn't be a diary like that at all. That's why basically I call it a non-diary. I think the sentiments that are in there, they are more felt by you, the viewers, than they're actually there in writing. I mean, I think photography is I think photography is a lie, but I think in translating sentiments of the photographer, it's actually very accurate. So it's not me that says I'm going to do a sad photo or a melancholic photo. The photo happens to be sadder or melancholic because that's what I'm feeling.
So you're saying that there's more of a...
It's like a thermometer, in a way. And I
So
think
almost an intuitive,
yes.
Spontaneous, implicit
well,
expression of
yes.
state of mind. Isn't it how you describe it in one of your
in
pages?
one
it's
page,
not a diary, it's
exactly.
a state of mind.
Yeah, because I think maybe it's interesting. There are various stages of instinctive process, because there is the photo making, but then there's also the choice of the photograph or photographs for that day, and the choice of what is going to be around the photograph in terms of collage, and the choice of text. So, the photograph can be taken at 9 in the morning, and I'll be doing the page only at 9 in the evening. So there's a day in between. But after we talked the other day, I was even thinking if this whole non-diary, like I call it, will not maybe be at the end the ultimate self-portrait in many ways. I don't know. This came to me after we
I think, that raises some interesting questions about the self, and to the extent to which the diary is a vehicle for the self. I suspect it probably isn't. I feel we ought to probably separate the artist from the artwork at some level, and whether there's a kind of renunciation of subjectivity going on in that form. I'm very struck by this kind of scripto-visual form that you have that's very haptic, that's quite haphazard. It's found elements, it's various forms of notation, quite indexical, which plays back against the self. So I guess what I'm suggesting is there's this kind of tension in the diary form. This is why, this for me is the meaning of this constantly repeated statement, this is not a diary.
Yeah.
That it's pushing back against subjectivity, which I have to say I love about it. It's one of the things that I like about it, bearing in mind the kind of insistent kind of narcissism about present.
And I also think I kind of talk of it like, I think, an outside viewer as well, because I'm constantly surprised by it, by what happens in the diary, So
In the diary or in your day? Or is it the same, or is it different?
It's different. It's quite different, actually. But
when the image and the text actually don't work together, when they go against each other, I feel that's when it works best.
I think that's the kind of tension that I'm
Yeah.
trying to describe. There's
Yeah.
something in it, despite the fact it's a diary, that for me curtails
Yeah.
authorial agency, which I really like. And that is-
And it started actually when I did we did an exhibition at here in Paris at Musée de la Croix before I started the diary, but the concept of the diary was already there with the same A4 pages, and I had one image which was a view, a non-view from my window because my window is stained glass, and this is years ago, and I wrote underneath the destruction of Aleppo during the civil war in Syria. And I thought that thing that you can't see outside from a window in Lisbon, and it looks, like a beautiful photograph of an element of my daily life against the atrocity that is happening across the world. That is one of the elements that I feel. Not that I want that many atrocities happen so I can use them, but that tension at the same time becomes very poetic, horribly poetic in a way.
And while obviously you're very much aware how a window is such a huge motif in the history of art and not just photography.
Yeah, a window is never a window. It's like I use a lot of glasses of water, because a window is never a window and a glass of water is never a glass of water. There's so many layers in there already that you just take the picture and it's already there. But the window serves well that purpose of recalling la vie ordinaire, daily life, because it's a very normal window. For the people who know Lisbon, it's a very typical window for an architecture of Lisbon in the 1940s. So it's kind of everyone in Lisbon had a window like that at some point. So you can.
And you
relate to
mentioned the
that
other
too.
day that, unfortunately, part for the history of the architecture, but also the history of current urbanism, those windows tend to slowly disappear.
Oh yeah, no, I have the last window in the building. Everyone changed already to, and it's rented. So I'm being actually kicked out. So the project's going to finish April next year. But yes, I mean those windows are gone, and they are before they decide to kick the whole building is being kicked out to raise the rents. But before that, they used to come like twice a year, knock on my door, and say, "Do you want to change the window?" And I was like, "No." But yes, I mean you find this window in Lisbon, this kind of windows in a particular architecture that. The architecture is not disappearing, but the windows are being changed for aluminium and PVC.
I had the good fortune to visit Daniel and sit in front of the window. I hope you can see in the book how the window as a motif just recurs and curves. And it's very haptic form because it's in the Polaroid form. There's something very auratic about it, very visceral about it. But it was very moving actually to sit there, and I don't know why I was quite so moved about it. There's something about the space in front of the window and the way you set those pictures up, which is like a stage. But there's one thing I wanted to ask you which completely intrigued me, and I have to say I became rather obsessed with this, is that I couldn't find a single electronic device in any of those images. I was like looking in vain for a mobile phone.
I think there's a computer at some point.
I couldn't see a computer anywhere.
Sometimes I work there with the
And I wondered
the
about
computer. Yeah, but it's not even on purpose. I mean, the window, the table, they are used mostly for meals. So the electronic device has no place at the eating table. But I think there must be a computer. So it's not on purpose. Or an iPhone. I think there are some pictures where an iPhone is on the table.
So you're not on a mission against technology.
Not photographically, but I would like to be parallel to it. No, I'm not. But one day I actually thought photography could be divided. I mean, nowadays, with the photographers who have the courage to photograph aluminium, which I don't have, and the photographers who are still doing wood and other materials, which I am. And I wish I could easily photograph aluminium, which is a very ugly element. But this embracing of modernity is also it's something that you have to do because we live in this time. We cannot. So I'm not doing this on purpose. It just happens.
But it could be unconscious, of course. But
It could be unconscious, and certainly I could not do this project with a PVC or aluminium window. especially because none of them are stained. You know, none of them have this beauty of that kind of glass. You know, they're all transparent. So, because that's also a sign of modern times. We want things to be transparent. We want big windows that we can see through, and you know, it's like we want transparent politics. We want transparent bank accounts of the people who rule us, and so forth. I think transparency is a sign of modernity. But then again, photography lives also from the mystery, so those windows are much more interesting. Mm-hmm. The stained glass is much more interesting for photography, where you don't, I mean, like Diane Arbus said, photography is a secret behind a mystery, or a mystery behind a secret, something like that. And in many ways it is.
Mm-hmm. But I was also wondering whether the book, and particularly that window space, which is so kind of haunting in a way, I was wondering whether it constructs a kind of pastoral space, you know, whether there's something, whereas a pastoral space, a space that's somehow out of the world. I mean, the pastoral kind of historically has been connected with feelings of kind of sexual freedom, of abundance at some level, of leisure time.
I wish.
You didn't mention the cathedral, that you felt that there was maybe a notion of altar.
Yeah, but that is, I started the window project 2008, something like that. And it was what you were saying. I stayed home for a long time without going out of the house for personal reasons, and I started it without this idea. And then I actually did a book based on where I used already a few with the light of the window, a few pictures with the light of the window, based actually on Pavese's diaries, which are very. They're not only very interesting and very well written, but they end with a sentence: "Let's stop the words. Let's pass on to action." And then he kills himself the next day. So they're very tragic. But that's when I started to look at the window in photographic ways, and then it felt to me, because I was not leaving the apartment, and I could see all the hours change through that window. It felt to me like cathedral grass or mosques that I've seen in Iran, where I had been traveling the previous year, and it's like a saintly light. I mean, and I don't want to turn it into something religious, because it's not. But the fact that you only feel the light and don't see outside, and the lights keep changing, made me continue to do the photographs. And that's why I got from Pavese to Perec to Attempting Exhaustion, because you cannot exhaust the subject. The light is always changing. So I can take, and I made it from the starter point that I would not fix the camera. So it's not. So the camera is always in my hand and it's moving. So it's not like something very.
So it's always the same and never quite the same.
Exactly. I didn't want it to be like the project where you put the camera and it's exactly, no. It's moving. So there is life, but. And sometimes someone says to me, "Oh, I really love that photo of the window that you posted on Instagram or shown," and I'm like, I don't know which one he's talking about. There's like thousands. It's like a huge thing of photographs, but they're all the same photograph in many ways. But they're not. They're all different, and that's what is fascinating. You know that you. And this was at the time 2008, where I felt, not that it, obviously it happened much earlier, but that all my friends who are photographers were going to faraway places to take, exotic pictures, and I was trying to do the other way. I mean, not only I felt constrained to the house, but I also felt constrained to myself and to find my subjects.
And this is so much Perec. You just said that you are not doing exotic, and I believe that one of the ways that Perec described his enterprise of Infraordinaire was to say, let's finally start the anthropology, not of the exotic, but of the endotic, as in endogame, or what is really us at home or in the street, what is just the usual. Yeah. The banal, the common.
Because how do you photograph the banal? Because photography, like I was saying the other day, usually deals with Christmas parties, birthday parties, and holidays. We don't do photography.
You mean vernacular, like family album?
Well, now with the
vernacular.
iPhone, everything is very easy, so we're doing photographs every day. But usually, family photographs are usually done on special occasions, right? I mean, all of that is changing with the digital, obvious. But how do you show the daily life without being? You have to be boring, obviously, because daily life is boring, and I think we all feel that in one way or the other. It's about routine, but we need routine at the same time. But how do you photograph in a boring way, but that doesn't necessarily bore the viewer? You know, I think it's like a very, how do you call it, this tightrope? Or how do you call where you walk and you can fall? I think it's I mean, there have been, we all know from photography history, there have been projects like that. But
I don't think that purely justifies very logically the format that you've chosen. I think many of those images really function as a sequence.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I don't think you're seeking the icon or the definite image, the point. As
No,
in
and
the
I go
other
back.
series.
I go back to subjects. Like even in this in a whole year, I go back to subjects. I go back to the window while it exists. I go back to my mother while she's still there.
Rock on the beach.
The rock on the beach, which is going to obviously to survive me. So I mean, there are different elements that I go back, and they're never the same, you know. And they create this idea of pattern, but also like a musical score where there is, you know, you go back to what you already know, and then you sing, and then there comes another strophe, new strophe.
So we're talking about time here, aren't we?
It's all about time. It's a diary, non-diary, but time is the key element for photography.
Because what struck me was just the kind of multiplicity of temporal frames, which I think you're very aware of, because I think there's one photograph where we say a second, a minute, a day, or second, a minute, an hour, a day. But I was really struck by how many, you know, I started actually listing the temporal frameworks, you know, that I was coming across the pattern of the diary across the year. There's also the idea of being in an instant or a moment. You talk about lifetimes because you mention all these people who have died on particular days, so you kind of register the existence of the lifetime. There's also kind of historical time frames, epochs. The Second World War is very important to you and is mentioned a lot. I think you mentioned the anniversary of the Chilean coup in '73, the Iranian revolution. So there's all these different layered, and then there's a kind of tempo through the diary itself. To me, it kind of slowed down a bit during the summer. There were fewer images, there was fewer writing.
I'm lazy in this.
Yeah, like the rest of us, it kind
Just
of.
on vacation, like everyone else.
And then
Not
these,
really.
and then these sequences and repetitions that you mentioned. It's actually a very complex temporal structure, which is one of the things I loved about it, and found very, very engaging once you start to think about that.
Yeah, because I mean, in the end, it's like you were saying about the exhibition in Lisbon, where I laid out the whole year of 23, and what struck me, and again, it was surprising for me because you can't plan. I mean, you plan, but you don't know how it's going to be when you actually have it on the wall. So you have the whole year on the wall, and it's a rounded wall, so it's very nice for the idea of the flowing of time. And then suddenly I thought, there's so much in a year, you know, because it's this whole wall, and it's going to take a while for people to see it. But at the same time, we all know that a year is nothing, you know, it goes by like this. So for me, it was the visualization of time, which is something we don't have, because time is something that, you know, like I like to say there is no present, because the moment I say there is no present, we're already in the future, and that was the past, and so forth. So only the future actually exists, and only the past exists, and the past is transformed by the future, and so forth. But how do we relate to time in a visual way? So in a way, that's my answer to it, and it's also a non-virtual Instagram, because it is the same method of an Instagram. You do something every day.
I'm convinced about this electronic device thing, because I think, you know, it's the opposite of Instagram, isn't it? I can't remember who it was, but someone said Instagram was like a sort of memoir in real time, but without the act of remembering. Whereas what you're doing is introducing the act of remembering. Sorry, but I interrupted.
No, at all. Speaking of those different temporal layers or stratas, even though this is not a diary, and you don't let's say, expand too explicitly on personal matters. It seems, though, that your family history does explain, and your personal trajectory explains very specifically in a concrete way. For instance, the fact that you're using several languages, that you're referring also to several countries, not just because you travel to them, but because there is this multiplicity part of your family substance.
Yeah.
And some subjects are maybe more challenging than others. And I'm wondering how you navigate those, or how you very practically, on a day, based on the image that you've chosen, you're going to end up writing in English or in French or in Portuguese, or is it fully spontaneous because it's so integrated in your life that's how it happens?
I think there's a part that is spontaneous, but like when I have what I call known portraits, for example, of my mother, the language I talk with her is German, so usually the phrase is in German. Or if it's something that from a book that I read in German or English, you know. So it has more to do with that, with the source, and with the connection that I have with that experience. Like sometimes I dream in German. You know.
Do you think there's a sentimental color or sensibility that is slightly different based on the language that you're using? Because that, I know that happens a lot with polyglot, like people who do speak on a daily basis several languages, and feel that there are some that allow them to not only express but almost feel things differently, slightly differently.
Yeah, I mean German makes me German makes me a foreigner in my own country, which is Portugal, where I was born. You know, so
Because it's your mother tongue?
because it's my house tongue, my mother and grandparents' tongue, and then I lived in Germany for 10 years when I was a teenager. So it's the language with which I learned to read books. Not as a child. I mean, as a teenager, you start to read the important books of your life. I started to read them in German. So. And none of my friends in Portugal share the language with me. So it's a divide that is there. And I could connect with the language, or if I say, let's meet at 4 o'clock, I'll be waiting for them always, you know, because that's my German side. And and there is nothing to do against that, because, you know, even if I manage to come later, they'll be always later. So yeah, but I think language transforms you as well. You know, so I could even say I have it would be a bit over, but it's also a bit true. I have a German day, because, you know,
What do you mean?
No, because I read a German book. I read you know, and it's different than reading a book in Portuguese or in English, because the poetry of the language is completely different, you know. Or I see a German film that connects me, or I'm studying something on Second World War or on the Holocaust and so forth, you know. And that rarely happens with Portuguese sources, you know. So.
But I think, isn't there also, for me, there's a strong suggestion of an identity. I don't want to use subjectivity because I'm trying to push that word out, but an identity which in some ways is post-national.
Yeah,
and you make almost explicit statements. I think there's one statement that you write where, like, nationalism is equivalent to fascism or something like that.
It's the start of. I think nationalism is the start of fascism. Really, I mean, it's not me who.
And patriotism is the last resort. Like, it's a
of a
scoundrel.
Of a scoundrel. Someone said that, not me, but I think it's also true. I mean, and we see what's happening. Yeah, we see what is happening with the world. I think we're all mixtures. I think this idea that we belong to one place is. I mean, obviously we have a home somewhere, or we could say, like, there was this American saying, "Home is where my heart is," or "Home is where my bills arrive." You know. There are different concepts, but the idea that we only belong to one place is based on an accident or
completely
chance,
circumstantial.
You know, so completely circumstantial. So I was born in Lisbon because Hitler kicked out the Jews from Germany before killing them, and my grandparents were smart enough to leave. So it's a coincidence that I was born. I could have been born in Brazil, or in the United States. I mean, I could not, because then my mother would have not met my
Maybe
Polish
you wouldn't
Jewish
be who
father,
you are
and I
today.
won't be here, and so forth. So all lives will be changed. So, but it's
We're
all,
really
it's,
nothing, Daniel. Oh my God.
So it's all. I mean, it's all coincidence after coincidence. But also, I was going to say when you were saying, I thought also, Duncan, when I use the language, I use it also often in a political way. So some sentences are stronger in that language than others. You know, there are some things in French that I find that they're not. I mean, you can translate them, but you lose the beauty of it.
Well, that's why the tone, I think, is interesting, because all sentences are not on the same regime, I think.
Yeah.
You also, just the same way that you're not afraid to go against the conceptual grain and just be spontaneous and rather intuitive. Similarly, sometimes some of the sentences are almost slogans or
Yes.
truism,
Yes.
maybe even
Yes,
sometimes.
yes. Or from songs, they're just
Right, lyrics.
things that we can recognize.
And this, to me, is maybe another indirect, implicit way to, channel maybe a sense of frustration, despair sometimes, but also attention to just a little detail, maybe a flower, or you'll make up, or it's like an incidental still life because now you have a lemon and an apple on your kitchen table. And those I find both sometimes in your face, but also very subtle, because it is precisely the combination of those different elements together and the sequencing, the cumulative way. The days are numbered, we said earlier, Duncan, you said that it's ironic, it's almost like comical in English, because usually, I mean, not to make it too bland, but the days are numbered, like we have some days left and then it's over. But in your sense, the way you number them, it's cumulative. So they're numbered in a way that they grow and they keep growing.
They're not counted, they're numbered. That's what yeah. But yeah, I think and like I was saying the other day, that it permits me to have a voice, because photography is silence. It permits to have a voice as a citizen, and that mixture, I think, makes the work interesting. You know, because the photographs are not especially great photographs. The words are not specifically great texts. You know, they're just almost blurbs often. You know, thoughts. Yeah, but they're very. They're like two sentences at most. Often it's just very short. But I think it's the mixtures that kind of surprises, and I think hopefully that it works.
I think, for me, it's not the layering; it's the intersection. You know, it's the intersection that produces the spark. Whether it's the temporal structure or the linguistic structure, it comes together. That for me is the moment when I sit up and think.
And sometimes you think about what's happening to the woman in Iran. Sometimes you think about what's happening disastrously in Gaza. Or sometimes you just laugh because I write, I'm not Picasso, but neither are you. You know.
Is this the moment to raise the S word, the Zebalt's word?
The Sebald word. Well, yeah, we spoke about Perec, we have to speak about
Okay,
Sebald.
we have to speak about Sebald. I mean, there are many things one could say about Sebald. I suppose hearing you talk about these different linguistic frames in which you work, I mean, there's this sense also of existential exile, which I derive quite strongly within Sebald's work. Is that something that's important to you? Or?
Yeah, no, I mean I've dealt with my family history and mine in the way that when I read Sebald, I found, I had this immediate affinity with what he was writing, because I mean I don't want to dramatize, because it's not about drama, but it's like a kind of double exile, because my grandparents came to Portugal in 1936 from my mother's side, from Germany, and from my father's side they came from Poland. But and then so my home was German speaking, and there was nothing to go back to. There was no hometown, let's say, from my grandparents. And then when I was 11, my mother decided to immigrate to Germany. So it was like for me it was like a double. And I think I've been dealing with that somehow since then. So, and Sebald also had this kind of double because he was working in England. He didn't have a father for many years because his father was imprisoned in the Soviet Union and only came back like 10 years after the war or something. My father left the family when I was 2. I use the word non-diary, but I actually have a book writing with photographs called Non-Father. So I live in the non-worlds a lot. And Perec was the first to reinvented, not Marc Roger, but Perec much before wrote about non-lieu, the non-place. So I just felt this enormous empathy with what Sebald was writing.
And is that formal as well? Because one of the things that strikes me about Sebald is the way that he kind of reinvents a tradition in European literature by using these very marginal forms. Things like the diary or the kind of biographical fragment, or there's almost a scrapbook-like quality to Sebald's work and you use very similar forms. You have these kind of syncretic forms, and is that an influence?
I mean, I did my PhD on Sebald and Perec, and at the end of and I'm a bit unhappy that I never followed that strain. Was I feel that Perec and Sebald were writers, yes, without doubt, but they were artists as well, using the writing as their means of communication, like I use photography. Mm-hmm. So in a way, I'm influenced, and other artists like Citadine as well. I'm influenced by Sebald, not only by his writing, but by his visual images that come through the writing, and obviously through the way. I always wanted to do organize an exhibition with Sebald's photographs without the text, because I think they would work mysteriously well. So what I'm saying is that the flow of images in the non-diary is probably also influenced by the way Sebald was putting images together, that some are obvious and others you don't really understand why he's using them. And there we have that mysterious side of it.
And another feature from Sebald, I think, that has been influencing you is this interior-exterior relationship in terms of resistance or political position. What was the
descendant? Yeah, Sebald says in an interview that to be against the government in your kitchen, and that relates to the kitchen window, to be against the government in your kitchen is the same as being for the government on the main square. Meaning, if I close myself in my kitchen behind that stained glass window, I do not have a voice publicly.
So thank you for publishing that book, because then you make it
public.
public.
So this work, I was very frustrated with photography, because photography is very silent, and I cannot be political with photography. I mean, I know there are artists who can. I'm talking about myself. I don't. So this is a way of speaking about. I mean, it's worth what it's worth. I think we all feel helpless with what's going on in the world, but it permits me to remember Iran. It permits me to remember other places where
memory
fascism,
to keep those thoughts alive.
The memory and what's happening now. I mean, in Portugal we now have 50 members of parliament from the extreme right party. So that enabled me also to, and pardon my French, or I won't say it, but to publicly in exhibition or on Instagram to go against this grain and maybe
and have the excuse that it's an artwork, so anything goes. Is that it?
Anything goes. Anything goes. I mean, and it's still allowed, because we all know that at some point you might not be able to show.
We could have a long discussion about memory, but I think we ought to throw it open to see if anybody has any questions for Daniel. Kenta has a microphone.
Come on, Mark.
Do you?
I know. 2 marks.
Of course, it's a diary, so of course there are lots of emotions, and each viewer each spectator of the show or reader of the book will react on some particular things in it. One thing that struck me in the show and in the book is death. The first page of your diary is about death. There are many pages about death of people you admire. There are pages about death of people you like, of friends of yours. And there are pages about death of catastrophes, of the Gaza, whatever. So to me, and of course it's a biased viewing, a biased reading of your work, but to me this came out after the exhibition at MAT as the most important factor I saw. Now you probably disagree, but I think each viewer will have this bias from your work.
Well, you think it's a bias? I think death became such a part of life. I mean, I was sitting here and I was thinking, just a year ago, I saw Rémi Cognier, who was a writer on photography for the last time, and it became such a part of my life, and so biased is relatively. I mean, it's all very relative. It influences my life, the death of these people, as the death of people that I don't know about in Iran, Gaza, or wherever, also influences. You know, so it's difficult, and in a way, it's like monuments to these people. I know it's in vain because it's just books that will end on a shelf and maybe disappear at some point. But it's also what we can do about it. You know, it's.
What made you start? Why the first page?
The first page here.
When you started
In 2018, but with Philip Roth, you mean?
Yeah.
That was a coincidence. That was truly a coincidence.
What do you mean a coincidence? What happened?
It was a day after Kenta came and visited me in Lisbon, and we had big discussions. And I decided to start a diary the day Kenta left. And that day,
It's Kenta's fault.
That it kind of is.
The dealer again.
That day, Philip Roth happened to die. So it was really truly a coincidence and more an accident for him than for me. but that was really a coincidence. But it's also the start of. So every death that is in the diary, I don't put deaths that did not. I mean, obviously my friends were my friends, but I don't put what I call international death in vain. It's not all the people who died that I put in. It's the people who at some point influenced me as writers or singers or cinema directors or
And
stars.
it goes from Rebecca Horn to Helmut Berger to
Yeah.
Jane Birkin.
Yeah, but
It's
these are
very
people that
wide range.
but I have wide range interests. So at some point they were in my radar, and I made of them in many ways. You know.
No question.
Daniel, it's a question a little bit about context, and I haven't had a lot of time with the book. Obviously, I know your work, but I was thinking of Ankarawa and the point of reference that would be my way of thinking about the book. I wonder if you could say a little bit about Ankarawa's extraordinary project, in which his date paintings, for example. I know he didn't do them every day, but
No,
he did.
And he put a newspaper on
With-
the
yeah,
box
and that.
with the news.
Yeah.
So it is very much related.
And he
Yeah.
did telegrams instead of Instagram.
He did
Yeah.
Telegram instead of Instagram, but that will be putting me on how do you say in English, on the shoulder of giants. But there is
seems
obviously
key.
a
It
relation.
seems key to the work, that relation. Although he strips back further.
Well, you quote him, by the way.
Oh, he's actually
I quote
there.
him at
I'm
some point, yeah,
still
sometimes.
live.
Yeah, I quote him. But I was always and still am very interested in diaries per se, even the diaries writers. I'm very interested in this. For example, the Kafka diary, where he writes, I went to the swimming pool this morning in the afternoon, or the other way around. This morning, Germany declared war to Russia. I went to the swimming pool after lunch. I mean, just the banality of it, and then all the lives will be changed by the first sentence. That's what I'm interested in, actually, because our lives go on. Our lives go on always as nothing happens, Trump was elected 2 days ago. Our lives are still the same, but we know they're going to change. We feel that, we feel that they're going to change. It might be minor changes, it might be bigger changes. everything that, I mean, the world is so connected now, but already before, but that everything that happens now will change our lives. We all know that the Gaza war is changing our lives in Europe as well. You know, the Ukrainian war is changing our lives in the rest of Europe and anywhere. So I think it has to do with that as well. You know, everything is political.
And this is how you cope with these dialectics. How you cope, like you manage.
I think we're
the
all
brutality of
and with climate change, I think we're all overwhelmed by everything that's around us. And I mean, I have no idea why Onkawara started the project. I mean, I'm not a conceptual artist. I mean, Kenta wants me to be a conceptual artist, but I'm not a conceptual artist. But I put a lot of thought in my work, and I really think if you want to be a photographer nowadays, that's what I tell my students. Because we are surrounded by photography, you need to think before you shoot, and often don't do the photograph. You know, think it over. You know, so but I don't see it as a conceptual project. I see it as a
ethic, almost.
As a what?
Ethics.
As an ethic
Ethics
and as
in
yeah,
image making.
yeah, and it's my poetry in many ways. I mean, it's it's about the state of the world, the best way I can do it.
Any more questions? There's one in the back, Kenta.
Merci. This is quite a weird question, I suppose. Obviously, this is a diary format, whether the title suggests it or not. And you speak a lot about political and cultural symbolicism within your work. Are you able personally, and you don't necessarily have to share what would be able to give that away, but when you look back at these images, are you able to see the difference between days that were charged and photos that were charged by worldly scenarios and photos that are charged by your own personal experiences? So maybe things that we can't necessarily see that might have happened in your personal life. Are you able to distinguish between them, and should we be able to as well? Or are they completely intertwined?
That's an interesting question. I am in so far that because of the different places where they're photographed, I kind of remember why I took it and the setting. But should you be able? I don't think it's necessary, really. That's why I go back to the window, and when I lose the window, I don't know. That's the other question. How is the diary going to look after the window? Because the window is so symbolic of exactly that, of sitting behind a window and thinking about all that is outside. But in the end, I don't know if it's that important. And they just become pages, and some are more relatable to others, to me, and some are more relatable to other people. Because I think, at least I don't know about the book because it's very private. A book is always a one person experience. But what I felt at the exhibition when all of these pages were on the wall, people sorry for always been talking about Instagram. Not that I'm obsessed with it, but it's a good measurement. Some images appeal to a lot of people, and then there is one page that appeals to two persons. And I'm always wondering, why does this page only, and that I find very interesting, because people find their private moments in there. So it's like, it's obvious why some are more popular. When I write, which was the end of the show, it's a page from 24. I went to a Patti Smith concert just the day before I started mounting the exhibition. So I put a picture of Patti Smith on stage, and people have the power. Obviously, anyone can relate to that. I mean, almost anyone. Like when Patti Smith sings it, it's the high moment of all her concerts. But then the more subtle things there, but like photographs, like some photographs touch directly to people, and I think it's very unconscious. That's the difference with painting. I think photography touches your unconscious memories more than anything else. You don't know really why you like a photograph. If the photograph has different layers. I'm not talking about, photographs, nice photographs that are obviously beautiful. I'm talking about photographs from authors who are not so, let's say, blunt. You relate to it because you still have something in you that makes a direct line to the subject,
That reminds me to ask you something. Seeing as we're in Paris, can I ask you a controversial question? Benjamin or Proust?
It's going to be all conversation. What?
Benjamin or Proust?
Oh, come on.
Why either or?
Well, Benjamin because the rationality is there, but Proust is Proust, But yeah, Benjamin has foreseen it all, And Benjamin was looking to the future. Proust was looking to the past in many ways. So I'm a bit too Proustian for my taste, and I would rather be more Benjamin for her.
Any more questions from anyone? There is a glass of wine waiting. Oh, one more. Here we go.
Maybe one last.
Yeah, Daniel, just congratulations anyhow, and also, more a remark, but I need you to approve. I have the feeling that we are talking here about a journal, and you're saying how talking about the incidents and the quotidian, and how, in a certain way, this is all like happening in parentheses. What you're saying, as if it were not like the most important battle, what we need today. That's what is so touching just today, and also with all what we have lived in the last days and years. Where is somewhere finally a voice which is clearly battling for freedom and battling for coming through with another thought. And how can we do it otherwise than undermining?
Yeah.
And that's your work. It is not so much like just a quotidian, nice journal. That's just your way of doing it.
That's very beautifully said. I couldn't say it myself, obviously. Thank you. But yes, no, I feel we're all striving, and let's go to Benjamin. Benjamin wrote that all generations feel it's the end of the world at some point. But I think we all have, and it's not going to be the end of the world. And like someone was saying to me yesterday at lunch, it's never going to be the end of the world. Might be the end of humanity, but we're not yet at that point. But we have this feeling of that we are unwell as a society generally. So we need to find ways to find also to each other, I love it when people write to me and say, I went there and felt something, whatever, because I think we need more and more feeling, like I feel when I read a book. So yes, I think this is a means of battling. It's a bit Don Quixote against the windmills, but it's also a self-help book. I'm also helping myself by doing it every day.
Like
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. But if it can help others, like when I wrote this book called The Known Father, which was the story of me and my absent father, when people came up to me, and then it was published, and people came up to me and said, oh, thank you for writing it, because I felt a lot about my own father. That is so, how do you say, enriching for an artist. Rewarding for an artist to know he's touching someone, by writing or by taking. And I think that's the thing with writing and with art. We do it for ourselves. We're all artists are in a way egomaniacal, but then the surprise is when you can do something for the rest of us.
Well, maybe we can wrap it up right there with your beautiful words. Thank you all very much, and thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just so that you know that.
No, c'est pas fini. Almost over. I guess some of you might not have seen the book or maybe even the work of Daniel before, and so it creates like images and a mind map of what we all evoked. And thank you so much, three of you, Duncan, Daniel, and Beatrice, for this wonderful conversation. So now we invite you to go back to the bookshop where you can discover the book, buy it, of course, have a drink, and also the book comes in two different shapes. The regular one, like the one you will find in bookstores, and another one.
Well, Daniel made some special editions of the book with some Polaroids and some text, handwritten manuscript in the book. And also Daniel has now an exhibition at the gallery, our space in the 15th. It's until Christmas. It's another project, but it's very much related. It starts from Daniel's garden, which is another idea of refuge. Thank you.